Imagine a future where economic stability feels like a distant dream, where prosperity seems reserved for a fortunate few. This is the current state of America. In the 20th century, America emerged as an economic powerhouse, a beacon of prosperity and innovation. But what was the root of America's economic success? America's economic transformation into a superpower began in the late 19th century when it entered the Gilded Age, a period marked by rapid industrialization and unprecedented economic growth. Beneath the glittering surface of progress, however, lay stark wealth inequities. The era saw the rise of industrial titans like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan, whose fortunes soared to unimaginable heights. These magnates controlled vast segments of the economy, from oil and steel to banking and railroads, amassing wealth that dwarfed the incomes of ordinary Americans. While the wealthy elite enjoyed opulent lifestyles, the majority of the population faced harsh working conditions, long hours, and meager wages. Factories, mines, and railroads employed millions of grueling, unsafe jobs, with little regard for worker welfare. The disparity between rich and poor became glaringly apparent, with urban slums expanding as workers struggled to survive in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. Americans widely recognized this as no longer acceptable, wishing to create a country where there is a fair deal for every man. Enter the Progressive Era and the New Deal, which laid the foundation for a strong middle class and widespread prosperity. Teddy Roosevelt, a champion of progressive reforms, introduced measures to reduce inequality. His antitrust laws broke up monopolies. Labor protections safeguarded workers' rights, and the implementation of income tax ensured a fairer distribution of wealth. Roosevelt's focus was on curbing the power of large corporations and ensuring that workers had a voice, which contributed to a more balanced and fair economic landscape. During his presidency, Roosevelt pushed for the creation of regulatory bodies like the Interstate Commerce Commission, which aimed to oversee and regulate the practices of businesses to protect public interest. These measures helped lay the groundwork for a more equitable economy, where competition could thrive and monopolistic practices were kept in check. Roosevelt's reforms were also instrumental in improving working conditions. The establishment of labor laws, including limitations on work hours and the prohibition of child labor, created a safer and more humane working environment. This focus on workers' rights not only improved the quality of life for many Americans, but also boosted productivity and economic growth. Fast forward to the 1930s, Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal further cemented these ideals. The New Deal introduced social safety nets, public works programs, and regulatory reforms, which not only helped reduce income inequality, but also supported the burgeoning middle class. Programs like Social Security, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the Works Progress Administration provided jobs and financial security to millions of Americans during the Great Depression. The New Deal also saw the establishment of institutions such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, to regulate the stock market and prevent the kinds of abuses that led to the 1929 crash. These initiatives were crucial in restoring public confidence in the economy and creating a more stable and resilient financial system. The impact of these policies was profound. For instance, the Social Security Act of 1935 provided a safety net for the elderly, the unemployed, and the disadvantaged, reducing poverty rates among these groups. The Wagner Act of 1935, also known as the National Labor Relations Act, empowered workers by protecting their rights to unionize and bargain collectively. These progressive policies, marked by government intervention and strong labor unions, were the bedrock of American success. Labor unions played a pivotal role in negotiating better wages, working conditions, and benefits for workers, ensuring that gains from economic growth were more evenly distributed. This period saw the rise of a robust middle class, which became the driving force behind America's economic expansion and consumer culture. The economic boom of the post-World War II era can be largely attributed to these progressive policies. The GI Bill, for example, provided returning veterans with access to education and home loans, spurring economic growth and the development of a skilled workforce. The construction of interstate highways during Eisenhower's administration further facilitated commerce and mobility, contributing to the nation's economic dynamism. So one must ask, what went wrong? What has changed in America since those golden days? The quest for continued economic growth led to significant shifts in policies during the 1980s. During this time, America was facing much economic turmoil. The economy was slowing, and many believed that there needed to be massive change in how the government should operate. Enter Reaganomics, a turning point marked by tax cuts for the wealthy, sweeping deregulation, and a reduction in social spending. These policies were intended to spur economic growth, but had far-reaching consequences. Ronald Reagan's economic policies were based on the principles of supply-side economics, which posited that reducing taxes on businesses and the wealthy would stimulate investment in economic growth. While this approach did lead to a short-term economic boom, it also resulted in increased income inequality and a widening gap between the rich and the poor. As union membership declined, workers' bargaining powers weakened, contributing to wage stagnation. The weakening of unions was partly due to legislative changes and partly due to the shifting economic landscape, where manufacturing jobs were increasingly outsourced to countries with cheaper labor. This decline in union power meant that workers had less ability to negotiate for better wages and benefits, leading to a stagnation in real income for many middle and lower-class Americans. Technology advancements and globalization further exacerbated these trends, leading to job displacement and wage polarization. High-skilled workers, particularly those in technology and finance, thrived, while many others, especially in manufacturing and traditional industries, were left behind. The rise of automation and offshoring meant that many well-paying jobs that formed the backbone of the middle class were either replaced by machines or moved to other countries. Globalization brought about significant economic changes. On one hand, it allowed American companies to access new markets and cheap labor, boosting profits and contributing to economic growth. On the other hand, it led to a loss of manufacturing jobs and increased competition for American workers, putting downward pressure on wages. The economic policies of the 1980s sowed the seeds of rising inequality. Tax cuts disproportionately benefited the wealthy, while cuts in social spending affected the most vulnerable populations. Deregulation, particularly in the financial sector, set the stage for the financial crisis that would come in later decades. One of the most significant impacts of deregulation was the savings and loan crisis of the late 1980s, where deregulated financial institutions engaged in risky investments, leading to widespread insolvencies and costing taxpayers billions of dollars in bailouts. This crisis foreshadowed the larger financial meltdown of 2008, which was also precipitated by deregulation and excessive risk-taking in the financial sector. The technological revolution of the 1990s and early 2000s further widened the economic divide. The rise of the internet and information technology created a new class of wealthy entrepreneurs and investors, while traditional manufacturing and service jobs became increasingly precarious. The benefits of technological advancements were not evenly distributed, leading to further economic polarization. So let's explore further on what were the lasting impacts of deregulation and globalization. The economic shifts of the 1980s left a lasting legacy. Today, America grapples with vast wealth inequality and widespread economic hardship. The social safety net has gaps, leaving many without adequate support, especially during economic downturns. Programs that were introduced during the New Deal era have not kept pace with the changing economic realities, leaving many Americans vulnerable. For instance, unemployment benefits and Social Security, while crucial, often fall short in providing sufficient support in times of economic distress. Union membership has continued to decline, weakening workers' voices and contributing to persistent wage stagnation. This decline has also led to a reduction in job security and benefits, making it harder for workers to build stable and prosperous lives. Increasing political polarization and partisanship have led to legislative gridlock, making it difficult to address these critical issues effectively. The political landscape has become increasingly divided, with significant challenges in passing meaningful reforms that could address economic inequality and provide better support for the middle class and the poor. In the increasingly polarized political landscape of the United States, the deepening divide between Democrats and Republicans has made bipartisan cooperation a rarity. This growing chasm has led to delays and standstills in passing critical economic legislation, creating a cycle of inefficiency and instability. Take, for instance, the frequent standoffs over budgets and debt ceiling increases. These deadlocks have resulted in government shutdowns and even credit rating downgrades, events that shake investor confidence and contribute to economic instability. When the government can't agree on a budget, essential services grind to a halt, and the ripple effects are felt throughout the economy. This polarization has also exacerbated policy uncertainty. Businesses, wary of the constant back and forth, hesitate to invest in an environment where tax laws, trade policies, and regulatory frameworks might change abruptly depending on which party holds power. This uncertainty stifles innovation and hampers long-term planning. Companies adopt a cautious wait-and-see approach, leading to reduced capital expenditures and slower hiring rates, which in turn slows overall economic growth. Moreover, partisan battles over significant economic issues such as healthcare reform, infrastructure investment, and climate policy divert attention and resources from effectively addressing these pressing concerns. Instead of implementing comprehensive solutions, efforts are often redirected toward short-term, politically expedient measures that fail to tackle underlying economic challenges. This focus on immediate gains rather than long-term stability and growth only worsens the economic outlook. Ultimately, pervasive political polarization hampers effective governance, disrupts economic stability, and deters growth. The U.S. economy, caught in this bipartisan tug-of-war, becomes more vulnerable to stagnation and less capable of responding to global economic shifts. This environment not only affects current economic conditions, but also casts a shadow over future prosperity, making it imperative to find common ground and foster a more cooperative political atmosphere. The wealth disparity between the rich and poor has widened, threatening social stability and reducing economic mobility. The top 1% of earners now hold a disproportionate share of the nation's wealth, while many Americans struggle with stagnant wages and rising living costs. This disparity has led to social unrest and growing calls for economic justice and reform. Today's American youth are disillusioned with the current capitalist system to such an extent that many are turning towards socialism, seeking alternatives that promise a fairer and more just society. Young people facing student debt, job insecurity, and an uncertain future are increasingly skeptical of the promises of capitalism and are advocating for policies that emphasize social equity and economic justice. The economic challenges faced by today's youth are stark. The burden of student debt has reached unprecedented levels, limiting their financial freedom and ability to invest in homes or start a family. The gig economy, while providing flexibility, often lacks the benefits and security of traditional employment, contributing to economic insecurity. As we reflect on America's economic journey from the heights of the progressive era to the challenges of today, we must ask ourselves, how can they restore the principles that once made America great? America stands at a crossroads. Will it learn from its past and rebuild a fairer, more inclusive economy? The answer lies in their collective will to prioritize honesty, quality, and responsibility, ensuring that the prosperity of the past can be the promise of the future.